The clock on my nightstand glowed 11:47 p.m., and I was supposed to be asleep. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of Halloween revelry filtering through my apartment windows. Sirens wailed in the distance, probably just drunk college kids causing trouble. Nothing unusual for October 31st in downtown Portland. I'd always been a light sleeper, but tonight felt different. There was an electric tension in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I rolled over and buried my face in my pillow, trying to block out the noise. Tomorrow was going to be brutal at the office, and I needed sleep. But as the minutes ticked by, that strange feeling of unease only grew stronger. It wasn't the typical Halloween anxiety I'd felt as a kid. This was something deeper, more primal, like being watched by something you can't see. At exactly midnight, everything changed. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Complete, absolute silence. The sirens had stopped. The distant music from the bars had cut out. Even the ever-present hum of traffic on the interstate had vanished. It was as if someone had pressed a cosmic mute button on the entire city. I sat up in bed, straining my ears, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my chest. Then I heard it. A voice, soft and barely audible, like someone whispering from the next room. But I lived alone, and I knew I'd locked all the doors and windows before bed. The voice was saying something I couldn't quite make out, the words flowing together like water. I held my breath, trying to focus, trying to understand what I was hearing. "Sarah," the voice whispered. "Sarah, can you hear me?" My blood turned to ice. That was my name. But the voice wasn't coming from anywhere in the apartment. It was coming from inside my own head. I stumbled out of bed and flicked on the lights, my hands shaking. The room looked exactly as I'd left it. My clothes from the day were still draped over the chair by the window. My laptop was closed on the desk. Nothing was out of place, nothing had changed. But that voice was still there, clearer now, more insistent. "Don't be afraid, Sarah. I'm not here to hurt you." I pressed my palms against my temples, as if I could physically push the voice out of my skull. This had to be some kind of breakdown. The stress from work, the lack of sleep, the isolation since my divorce 6 months ago, it was all catching up to me. I was having auditory hallucinations. That had to be it. "I know what you're thinking," the voice continued, and now I could tell it belonged to a man. His tone was calm, almost soothing, like a therapist trying to talk someone down from a ledge. "You think you're losing your mind, but you're not. This is real, Sarah. I'm real." I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My skin was pale, my brown eyes wide with terror. I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. "Who are you?" I whispered to my reflection, feeling foolish for talking to a voice in my head. "My name is David," the voice replied immediately. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks now, but tonight is special. Tonight, the barrier is thin enough for us to really connect." I gripped the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles went white. "This isn't real. You're not real. I'm having a psychotic break." "Touch your left wrist," David said. I looked down at my wrist, confused. There was nothing there except a small birthmark I'd had since childhood. A crescent-shaped mark about the size of a dime that my mother always said looked like a tiny moon. "Now touch your right wrist," he instructed. I lifted my right hand and nearly screamed. There, on my right wrist, where there had never been anything before, was an identical crescent-shaped mark. The skin was slightly raised as if it had been there for years, but I knew with absolute certainty that it hadn't existed an hour ago. "Do you believe me now?" David asked. I sank to the bathroom floor, my legs giving out beneath me. "What's happening to me?" "You're connected to someone, Sarah. To me. We share something that most people don't understand. Something that only becomes active on certain nights, under certain conditions. Halloween midnight is one of those times." I crawled back to my bedroom and grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to dial 911. But when I held the phone to my ear, there was no dial tone. The screen showed full bars, but the phone was completely dead. "Technology doesn't work properly when we're connected," David explained. "The energy we generate interferes with electronic devices. That's why the city went quiet. We're affecting everything within about a mile radius. I want you to leave, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Get out of my head. I can't do that, Sarah. This connection isn't something I can control. It happens whether we want it to or not, but I can help you understand it. I pulled my knees to my chest and rocked back and forth on the bed. This is insane. People don't just share minds. That's not how the world works. How do you think the world works? David asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. You spend 40 hours a week in a cubicle, processing insurance claims. You eat the same sandwich for lunch every day. You haven't spoken to another human being outside of work in 3 weeks? Is that really living, or is that just existing? The accuracy of his observation hit me like a physical blow. How could he know so much about my life? Are you stalking me? I'm not stalking you because I'm not near you. Not physically anyway. I'm about 2,000 miles away, in a hospital bed in Philadelphia. A hospital bed? I've been in a coma for 6 months, Sarah. My body is being kept alive by machines, but my consciousness has been wandering, looking for someone like me, someone who could hear me, and I found you. The room started to spin. I gripped the comforter, trying to anchor myself to something real. People in comas don't have wandering consciousness. That's not medically possible. A lot of things aren't medically possible, David said. That doesn't make them any less real. Tell me, have you been having strange dreams lately? Dreams where you're in places you've never been, talking to people you've never met? I had been having strange dreams. For the past month, I'd been waking up with vivid memories of conversations I'd never had, places I'd never visited. I'd chalked it up to stress. But now, the hospital room with the beeping machines. I whispered. You've been there, David said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. You've seen me. I had seen him. In my dreams, I'd stood beside a bed where a man lay motionless, tubes and wires snaking from his body to various machines. He was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and sharp features. Even unconscious, there had been something intense about him, something that had made me feel like he was aware of my presence. The car accident, I said, the memory surfacing. You were in a car accident? 3 cars and a semi-truck on I-95. I was the only survivor, but my brain was deprived of oxygen for too long. The doctors say there's minimal brain activity, but they don't know what they're looking at. They don't understand that some minds can exist outside the physical boundaries of the skull. I stood up and began pacing the room, trying to process what I was hearing. Let's say I believe you. Let's say you're really a comatose man in Philadelphia somehow talking to me through, what? Telepathy? Something like that. Why me? Why not someone else? Because you're like me, Sarah. You always have been. Haven't you ever known things you shouldn't know? Felt things that weren't your own emotions? Seen things that hadn't happened yet? The questions hit too close to home. Growing up, I'd always been the weird kid who knew when someone was lying, who could sense when something bad was about to happen. I'd learned to keep those feelings to myself after years of being called a freak by other kids. As an adult, I'd convinced myself it was all just intuition, coincidence, wishful thinking. That's different, I said weakly. Is it? When your marriage was falling apart, didn't you know exactly what your husband was thinking? Didn't you see his affair before he even had it? I stopped pacing. David was right. 6 months before I'd found the text messages on Mark's phone, I'd been having dreams about him with another woman. I'd seen her face, heard their conversations, felt his guilt and excitement, and the sick thrill of betrayal. I'd told myself it was paranoia, but when I finally discovered the truth, every detail had been exactly as I'd dreamed it. How do you know about that? Because when minds like ours connect, we share everything. Your memories are becoming mine, and mine are becoming yours. That's how I know about your sandwich. Turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, mustard, no mayo, every single day for the past 3 years. That's how I know about the promotion you didn't get because your boss thinks you're too quiet. That's how I know about the novel you've been writing in secret, the one about the woman who can see into other people's minds. I felt like I was falling, even though I was standing perfectly still. The novel was something I'd never told anyone about, not even Mark. It was my deepest secret, a fantasy I'd been nurturing for years about a woman who could read thoughts and see the future. I'd written over 300 pages, but I'd never shown it to anyone because I was convinced it was terrible. "It's not terrible," David said, reading my thoughts. "It's actually quite good. You have a gift for character development, and your prose style is more sophisticated than you give yourself credit for." "Stop it," I said, pressing my hands over my ears. "Stop reading my mind. I can't turn it off any more than you can turn off hearing my voice. We're connected now, Sarah, for better or worse." I ran to the living room and turned on all the lights, desperate for something normal, something that made sense. But even surrounded by the familiar furniture and decorations of my own apartment, I couldn't escape the feeling that my reality had fundamentally shifted. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tonight?" "Halloween has always been special for people like us," David explained. "The boundary between the conscious and unconscious mind becomes more permeable. Ancient cultures understood this. That's why they celebrated Samhain, the night when the veil between worlds grows thin. They weren't just talking about the land of the dead. They were talking about the realm of pure consciousness, the place where minds can touch across any distance." I slumped onto the couch, exhausted by the impossibility of it all. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me." "Help you how?" "My body is dying, Sarah. The doctors think I can't hear them, but I can. They're planning to remove life support next week. My parents have already signed the papers." The anguish in his voice was heartbreaking. Whatever was happening to me, whether it was real or some elaborate hallucination, David's pain felt genuine. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I don't see how I can help you. I'm nobody special. I process insurance claims in Portland, Oregon. I can't even help myself." "You can come to me," David said urgently. "If you're here when they disconnect the machines, if you're touching my physical body when my consciousness separates completely from it, you can anchor me. You can keep me from dissolving into nothing." "That's crazy." "Is it crazier than having a conversation with someone who's unconscious in a hospital 2,000 miles away?" He had a point, but the idea of flying across the country to sit with a stranger while he died was beyond anything I could imagine doing. "I know it sounds impossible," David continued, "but think about it. What do you have to lose? Your job that you hate? Your empty apartment? Your non-existent social life? When was the last time you felt truly alive, Sarah? When was the last time you did something that mattered? I can't just abandon my life." "What life? You're not living. You're hiding. You've been hiding from who you really are for so long that you've forgotten you have extraordinary abilities. You could be so much more than you are." I wanted to argue with him, but the truth was that he was right. I had been hiding. Ever since childhood, I'd been trying to be normal, to fit in, to avoid the stares and whispers that came with being different. I'd built a safe, predictable, utterly meaningless existence. "Even if I wanted to help you," I said, "I don't have the money for a last-minute flight, and I can't just take time off work without notice." "Check your laptop," David said. I frowned and opened my computer. The screen flickered to life, showing my email inbox. At the top was a message from Southwest Airlines confirming a flight from Portland to Philadelphia departing at 6 a.m. Below that was an email from my supervisor approving a week of emergency personal leave. "I didn't book a flight," I said, staring at the screen, "and I didn't request time off." "I did," David said simply. "I told you, the connection works both ways. I can access your memories, your knowledge, your accounts. I know your passwords, your social security number, your credit card information. I booked the flight and sent the email while you were in the bathroom. That's identity theft. That's survival. Sarah, I'm going to die next week whether you help me or not. But if you come to Philadelphia, if you're there when it happens, something incredible could occur. We could merge completely. Two minds becoming one, but stronger than either was separately. The idea terrified me. What happens to me? Do I cease to exist? I don't know, David admitted. This has never been done before, as far as I know. We'd be pioneers, explorers of consciousness itself. But I hope, that we'd both continue to exist, just in a new form. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Outside, the city was still eerily quiet. No cars moved on the streets below. No lights were on in the other apartment buildings. It was as if the entire world had been put on pause. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked. "How do I know you're not some kind of demon or evil spirit trying to possess me?" "Because you can feel who I am," David said. "Not just hear my words, but feel my essence. I'm scared, Sarah. I'm lonely. I'm desperate. But I'm not evil. I'm just a man who's been trapped in darkness for 6 months, reaching out for the only light I can see." He was right. Beneath his words, I could sense his emotions as clearly as if they were my own. Fear, yes, but also hope, loneliness that matched my own, and something else. A deep, abiding love for life that reminded me of who I used to be before I learned to play it safe. "The flight leaves in 6 hours, I said. "I know. I'd have to pack, get to the airport, fly across the country to sit with a stranger while he dies. Yes, and I might die in the process. You might. Or you might finally start living." I stood there for a long time, watching the silent city. Somewhere out there, Halloween was still happening. People were still in costumes, still pretending to be someone else for one night. But I had the chance to become someone else permanently. "What's your last name?" I asked. "Kellerman, David Kellerman. I'm in room 314 of Pennsylvania Hospital, the ICU. David Kellerman," I repeated. The name felt familiar on my tongue, as if I'd spoken it 1,000 times before. "Will you come, Sarah?" I thought about my novel, about the woman who could see into other people's minds. I'd written her as brave, adventurous, willing to risk everything for love and connection. She would have already been on her way to the airport. "I'll pack a bag," I said. The relief in David's voice was palpable. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided anything for sure. I'm just exploring my options." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. I was going to Philadelphia. I was going to sit with a dying stranger and possibly die myself in the process. After 32 years of playing it safe, I was finally going to do something that mattered. As I pulled clothes from my closet and threw them into a suitcase, David's voice filled my head with stories. He told me about his childhood in suburban Philadelphia, about his parents who still visited him every day, despite the doctor's grim prognosis. He told me about his job as a freelance photographer, about the assignments that had taken him all over the world. He told me about the novel he'd been planning to write, about the woman he'd loved and lost, about the dreams he'd had for a future that had been cut short by twisted metal and broken glass. His life sounded so much richer than mine, so much more vivid and real. Even ending in tragedy, it had been a life fully lived. I envied him that. "Don't envy me," David said, reading my thoughts again. "Your life isn't over, Sarah. It's just beginning." By the time I finished packing, it was 3 a.m. The city was still silent, still frozen in that supernatural quiet that had descended at midnight. I called a cab, but the phone lines were dead. I tried my rideshare app, but my phone still wasn't working properly. "You'll have to drive," David said. "My car's been in the shop for 2 weeks. Then you'll have to walk to the airport. It's 8 miles. Then you'd better get started." I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror one last time. I looked different somehow. More alert, more alive than I had in months. My eyes had a brightness I hadn't seen since before my marriage fell apart. "Are you ready?" David asked. "No," I said, "but I'm going anyway." I stepped out into the Halloween night, dragging my suitcase behind me. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and something else. Something like electricity, like possibility. Above me, the sky was clearer than I'd ever seen it in the city. Stars shone with unusual brightness, as if they were trying to guide my way. As I walked through the empty streets, David continued to talk. He told me about the places he'd traveled, painting pictures so vivid I could almost see them myself. The sunrise over Angkor Wat, the northern lights dancing above the Arctic Circle, the bustling markets of Marrakesh. His memories became mine, expanding my world beyond the narrow confines of my daily routine. "Is this what it's like?" I asked. "Being connected to someone?" "This is just the beginning. David said. "When we're in the same room, when you're touching my physical body, the connection will be complete. We'll share everything, every memory, every emotion, every thought. What if we don't like what we find in each other? Then we'll deal with it together." That's what connection means, Sarah. It means never being alone again. The walk to the airport took me 3 hours. My feet were blistered and my suitcase felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but I kept going. With each step, the voice in my head became clearer, more distinct. David's personality began to feel as familiar as my own. His sense of humor, dry and slightly sarcastic. His way of seeing beauty in unexpected places. His fierce independence tempered by a deep longing for connection. By the time I reached the airport terminal, I felt like I'd known him my entire life. The airport was chaos. Flights were delayed or canceled due to some kind of electrical malfunction that had affected air traffic control systems across the country. Passengers were stranded, angry, demanding answers that no one could provide. But somehow, miraculously, my flight to Philadelphia was still showing on time. "How is that possible?" I asked David as I made my way to the gate. "The connection affects technology, but it can also enhance it when necessary. I've been influencing things, making sure you get here. You can do that? We can do that. Together, we're more powerful than either of us alone." I boarded the plane just as the sun was rising. Most of the other passengers looked exhausted, frustrated by the night of travel delays, but I felt energized, electric with anticipation. I was finally doing something real, something that mattered. As the plane lifted off, Portland falling away beneath us, David's voice grew stronger in my head. "I can see the sunrise through your eyes," he said wonderfully. "It's beautiful. Can you feel what I'm feeling?" I asked silently, not wanting to disturb the other passengers. "Everything. Your fear, your excitement, your hope. It's been so long since I felt hope." The flight seemed to pass in minutes rather than hours. We talked constantly about books, movies, art, philosophy, dreams, fears. David's mind was sharp and creative, constantly making connections I would never have thought of. He saw patterns in everything, found meaning in the most mundane details. "You're a poet," I told him. "You're a philosopher," he replied. "You think about things deeply, but you're afraid to trust your own insights." I'm afraid to trust anything about myself. That's going to change. When we landed in Philadelphia, I could feel David's excitement mixing with my own. We were so close now. Just a short taxi ride to the hospital, and we would finally be in the same room. The taxi driver was an older man who kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay, lady? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," I said. Pennsylvania Hospital was a massive complex of brick and glass buildings. The ICU was on the 3rd floor, and as the elevator carried me upward, my heart hammered against my ribs. "Room 314, David whispered. Though his voice was so clear now, it felt like he was speaking directly into my ear. I found the room and paused outside the door, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was about to do. Inside that room was a stranger whose mind had somehow merged with mine. A man who might die while I watched. A man whose death might somehow become my own. "Sarah," David said gently, "I need you to know something before you come in." "What?" "I love you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You don't even know me. I know everything about you. I know you feel guilty about your mother's death, even though the cancer wasn't your fault. I know you cried yourself to sleep for a month after your dog died when you were 12. I know you have a scar on your knee from when you fell off your bike trying to impress Tommy Henderson in 3rd grade. I know you're afraid of commitment because everyone you've ever loved has left you." Tears were streaming down my face. "That's not love. That's just information. I know you sing in the shower when you think no one can hear you. I know you talk to your plants like they're your friends. I know you keep your ex-husband's sweater in the back of your closet because it still smells like him. I know you write poetry on napkins when you're waiting for the bus. I know you have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. And now I have one too." I looked down at my wrist. The mark was still there, still raised and permanent looking. "I know all of that," David continued. "And I love you anyway. I love you because of it. I love your kindness and your strength and your stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seems hopeless. I love the way you see the world, the way you find beauty in small things. I love that you're brave enough to be here. David, you don't have to say it back. Just know that whatever happens in the next few minutes, you are loved completely and without reservation. I wiped my eyes and pushed open the door to room 314. The man lying in the hospital bed looked exactly as he had in my dreams. Dark hair, sharp features, pale skin. Tubes ran from his nose and mouth to machines that beeped and hummed rhythmically. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, but his eyes were open, and they were looking directly at me. "Hello, Sarah," David said, and this time the voice came from his physical lips as well as from inside my head. I approached the bed slowly, afraid that if I moved too quickly, the spell would be broken and this impossible moment would end. "The doctors say you're unconscious," I whispered. "The doctors see what they expect to see, but you see me as I really am." I reached out and touched his hand. The moment our skin made contact, the world exploded into color and sensation. His memories flooded into me like a tidal wave. His first kiss, his last conversation with his father, the moment of impact when the semi-truck ran the red light. My memories flowed into him just as forcefully. My wedding day, my first published short story, the morning I woke up and realized my marriage was over. We were no longer two separate people sharing a connection. We were one consciousness inhabiting two bodies, seeing the world through four eyes, feeling everything twice as intensely. "The machines will stop working in about an hour," David said, both aloud and in my mind. "When that happens, when my body begins to shut down, you need to hold on tight. Don't let go, no matter what you see or feel. What will happen? I don't know, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." I pulled a chair next to the bed and took his hand in both of mine. His skin was warm, alive, real. The monitors continued their steady beeping, marking time until the moment when everything would change. "Are you afraid?" I asked. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also excited. We're about to discover something that no one has ever experienced before. What if it doesn't work? What if you just die? Then I'll die knowing that I wasn't alone at the end, that someone cared enough to be here." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, our minds intertwined, sharing the peaceful moment before the storm. Through the window, I could see the sun setting over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "It's beautiful," David said. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." At exactly 9:47 p.m., the machines began to fail. The monitors flickered and went dark. The ventilator wheezed to a stop. David's hand tightened in mine as his body began the process of dying. "Don't let go," he whispered, his voice becoming fainter. "I won't," I promised. The room filled with an otherworldly light, bright and warm and welcoming. I could feel David's consciousness separating from his physical form, but instead of drifting away, it flowed directly into me. His memories, his personality, his essence, everything that made him who he was, merged completely with my own. For a moment, I was both Sarah and David simultaneously. I could feel my heart beating and his heart stopping. I could see through my eyes and his eyes, though his were beginning to close. I was living and dying at the same time, existing in two states of being at once. Then something extraordinary happened. Instead of one consciousness absorbing the other, we began to transform into something entirely new. We were no longer Sarah or David. We were someone else entirely, someone who had never existed before. We had Sarah's memories and David's dreams, Sarah's caution and David's courage, Sarah's creativity and David's vision. The transformation was painful and beautiful and terrifying and wonderful all at once. I felt like I was being torn apart and rebuilt from the ground up. Every cell in my body was changing, adapting to house this new hybrid consciousness. When it was over, I was still sitting in the chair beside the hospital bed, but everything had changed. David's body was still and silent, but he wasn't gone. He was part of me now, as much a part of me as my own memories and thoughts. I looked at my hands and gasped. Both wrists now bore the crescent-shaped birthmark. But more than that, I could see things I'd never been able to see before. Auras of light around objects, streams of energy connecting all living things. The hospital suddenly seemed less like a building and more like a nexus of human emotion and experience. "How do you feel?" David asked. And I realized he was speaking from inside my mind, but it wasn't intrusive anymore. It was natural, like having a conversation with myself. "Different," I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the quiet room. "Stronger. We're stronger. Together we can do things neither of us could do alone." I stood up and walked to the window. Philadelphia stretched out before me, millions of lights representing millions of lives, millions of stories. And I could sense them all, the joy, the sorrow, the hope, the fear. The entire spectrum of human experience was spread out like a tapestry below me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we live," David said. "Really live. We have work to do, people to help. There are others out there like us, Sarah. People with abilities they don't understand, connections they're afraid to explore. We can help them." "How?" "The same way I helped you. By reaching out, by showing them they're not alone, by teaching them what we've learned." I thought about my novel, about the woman who could see into other people's minds. She had spent the entire story trying to use her abilities to help others, to make the world a little better. Now I had the chance to live that story for real. "The doctors will be here soon," I said, looking at David's still form. "They'll want to know what happened. Tell them he died peacefully. Tell them someone was with him at the end. They don't need to know the rest. And then we go home. We finish your novel, our novel. We help people. We live the life we were meant to live." I leaned down and kissed David's forehead, saying goodbye to his physical form, while knowing that his spirit would live on in me, in us. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for being brave enough to come," he replied. "Thank you for saving me." We saved each other. As I walked out of Pennsylvania Hospital and into the Philadelphia night, I felt more alive than I ever had before. The world was full of possibilities, full of people waiting to be helped, full of connections waiting to be made. Halloween was over, but for me, it was just the beginning. I was no longer just Sarah, the lonely insurance adjuster who processed claims and ate the same sandwich every day. I was something new, something unprecedented, something powerful. I was no longer afraid of being different. I was ready to embrace it. The flight back to Portland was smooth and uneventful, but as we descended through the clouds toward the runway, I could sense other minds like mine scattered throughout the city below. Lonely people who didn't understand why they were different, who had spent their lives hiding from abilities they couldn't explain. "Can you feel them?" David asked. "Yes," I said, smiling as the plane touched down. "I can feel them all. We were going to change everything."